During filming in 1965, an incident occurred that caused the entire cast to lose it. Neither a death nor an accident occurred. Take after take of the film's most crucial scene was marred by a noise, a silly, juvenile noise. Attempts to resolve issue cost the studio thousands of dollars. Since they were unable to do so, they decided to conceal it. The truth of what transpired in that gazebo remained shrouded in secrecy for 3 decades. The secret was protected even by Christopher Plummer, who despised the film. Until Julie Andrews revealed all in an impromptu television interview. Terrifying helicopter, a courageous cameraman was fastened to the side where the door normally would have been. 2 movies were produced in 1956 by a German studio based on the memoirs of Maria von Trapp. In West Germany, they became huge hits. Indeed, they were the most successful films produced there after the war, and their influence extended all the way to South America. American studios, meanwhile, dismissed them as amateurish. After that, an unusual occurrence occurred. To evaluate possible ideas, Paramount enlisted the help of Tony-winning filmmaker Vincent J. Dunhue. Like everyone else, he found the films to be awkward. However, he was profoundly moved by the story. Therefore, he stated something daring rather than promoting it as a film. Filming this would be a huge mistake. Mary Martin would really appreciate it if you made it into a musical for Broadway. Her concept sparked a revolution. Years ago, Maria von Trapp had sold the rights to the film for about $9,000. That amounts to around $104,000 in today's currency. It was insignificant, and that was the case both then and now. Hollywood was interested in purchasing the title alone, but Maria declined. Anyone who wanted to share her tale had to tell her story in its entirety, she said. Mary Martin and Richard Halliday attempted to contact Maria regarding the stage rights in the late 1950s. She remained elusive, though. Along with Father Wozner, she was serving as a missionary in Papua New Guinea. There was always a letter waiting for them at each new mission post from a couple in the United States. Maria shredded them. The Broadway stage had no appeal for her. She devoted her life to assisting others. And then destiny intervened. San Francisco was the port of arrival for Maria and Wozner's return to the United States via ship. Excitedly, Richard Halliday stood by. The tickets to see Annie Get Your Gun, starring Mary Martin, were given to them by him. Maria had to deliver the disappointing news after the show, but she was impressed anyway. The Germans had already purchased the rights from her. Nonetheless, she encouraged them to give it her all. It wouldn't be long before that shot became famous. Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein originally intended for the musical to feature authentic Austrian folk tunes, with only a handful of new compositions by them. However, they refused to write more than one song. Traditional European music wouldn't mesh with their Broadway approach. "Let us compose the whole music or we're out," they told the producers. While they completed Flower Drum Song, the producers decided to hold off. Oh, dear. Yielded results. Starring Mary Martin and Theodore Backel, the musical premiered on Broadway on November 16, 1959. An astounding $232 million in advance ticket sales blew beyond the production budget of $400,000. The musical was performed 1,143 times. By the end of her run, Mary Martin had only missed one performance. The film rights ignited a bidding war in June 1960, just a few short months after. $1.25 million was paid by 20th Century Fox, the winner. Over $13 million as of this writing. The Cleopatra fiasco has the studio in a financial bind. A odd stipulation in the arrangement made this extremely risky. If the film's gross revenue was greater than $12.5 million, the writers would receive 10%. It seemed like a joke to Howard Lindsay. How many movies have ever made more money than that? The realization was on the horizon for him. It was a contentious decision to cast Maria von Trapp as the lead in the film adaptation. After being passed over for the part of Eliza in My Fair Lady, Julie Andrews was devastated. Instead, Audrey Hepburn was chosen. Director Robert Wise sensed potential in Andrews, despite Hollywood's opinion that she was too ugly to be on screen. After seeing Disney's unfinished Mary Poppins footage, he approached the scriptwriter for advice. Who wants to sign her first? We should. In today's money, Andrews' $225,000 signing bonus is worth nearly $2.28 million. Just one price, with no royalties or proportion based on box office receipts. The stage adaptation brought in more than $8 million for Mary Martin. Fox would come to deeply regret not sharing in Andrews's earnings. It was sweet vengeance that she won for Mary Poppins. Even though he had rejected her, she praised Mr. Jack Warner during her acceptance speech. Even casting Captain Von Trapp was a challenge. On multiple occasions, Christopher Plummer declined. He felt the part was flat and uninteresting. A letter he sent to the screenwriter requesting revisions was also written by him. He showed his affections for Maria with a passionate song and improved the discourse. While casting, director Wise considered different actors, featuring Sean Connery, Richard Burton, and Bing Crosby. It all seemed off. At last, Wise boarded a plane to London, where he persuaded Plummer to join, but only if he had the power to change the character's personality. Plummer despised the project as early as that. The Sound of Mucus, he dubbed it. Almost all of the shoot was consumed by him. He came clean about his inebriation during the family's last performance scene later on. A major blunder on Hollywood's part was Julie Andrews' $225,000 compensation. She didn't receive a dime of the film's $286 million worldwide earnings after that initial check. Fox was in a state of panic. The production of Cleopatra, which cost $15 million, almost bankrupted the studio. Real estate and their backlit were put up for sale. They were about to go over the edge when they heard music, but even the chairman was let go. The one celebrity they underpaid the most, though, was Julie Andrews, their biggest star. Sadly, not everyone was chosen. Mia Farrow tried out for the part of Liesl no less than 3 times. She was in her 20s. The director's notes were brief, pleasant, and mild, but they lacked enthusiasm. She was also not good at dancing, in his opinion. The winning actress, Charmian Carr, was 21 years Farrow's senior, but she possessed the charisma that the part required. The door to Rosemary's Baby was opened by Farrow's refusal, which halted her path in musicals. Terry Garr, Patty Duke, and Kurt Russell were among the other contenders. However, Nicholas Hammond, who was just 15 years old, was cast as Friedrich. As of 1977, he was officially the first Spider-Man in a live-action film. The closeness amongst the other Von Trapp children was genuine, and they were handpicked after extensive auditions. They frequently reconnected, even later in life. They remained lifelong friends with Plummer and Andrews. Nothing could possibly top Gone with the Wind, in my opinion. It remained unmoved at the top of the box office for 27 years, making it through 2 world wars, Hollywood's golden age, and the advent of television. But suddenly music started to play. It accomplished the unimaginable in November 1966, only 18 months following its publication. After collecting $286 million at the box office, it dethroned Gone with the Wind. Even without inflation, that sum wouldn't have sufficed. The achievement was magnified even further when it was adjusted to reflect the prevailing ticket costs of the era. People weren't merely shelling out more cash, they were descending in large numbers. It wasn't merely about the money, musicals had never looked so powerful. Worldwide, that picture made $283 million. That's around 12% of the total population at that time. Even those who couldn't understand a word of English were joining in the song. Spectators in every continent fell head over heels for the same melodies and plot. Streaming video, social networking, and worldwide advertising campaigns did not exist. All it takes is recommendations and repeat viewings. It transpired in that way. Beyond just amusement, the picture evolved into something greater. It sparked a cultural explosion that swept the globe. Even those who couldn't understand a word appeared to be familiar with the melodies. Similar to a common pulse, it felt real. Afterwards, the Academy Awards, during which she won 5 nominations for Best Picture, Director, Sound, Editing, and Score. The upbeat musical stood out in a year full with serious tragedies like Dr. Zhivago. Already a winner for West Side Story, director Robert Wise demonstrated his mastery of the genre. The plot and its construction were both honored by the awards. Every technical component coordinated perfectly. The editing, timing, music, and sound were all noteworthy. The music also managed to persuade reviewers that musicals were art during an era when they were meant to be purely entertaining. On the other hand, the audience was never meant to know about the mayhem that transpired prior to one of the film's most passionate scenes. At the moment Maria and the captain confessed their love to each other in the gazebo, the scene appeared idyllic. A mystical kiss, gentle illumination, and gentle speech. However, there was a lot of background noise on stage. Disturbing, raucous, and damp sounds. It was emanating from the carbon arc lamps. The moonlight effect was achieved with the help of these enormous devices. They were meant to add that ethereal, luminous touch to the image, but all they did was make a raspy noise. A lanky, ungainly, gurgling raspberry. Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer's kisses were so passionate that they made the lights groan every time. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. It was the worst possible time. The lights would yell out another obnoxious noise precisely when the most heartfelt lines were about to be sung. After Plummer would tell Maria, "I love you," the raspberry would appear. 20 attempts later, they still hadn't figured it out. Standing nose to nose, they attempted to keep it together, but each time a noise would come, Julie Andrews recounted, they would both start laughing uncontrollably. A loop formed. The more they made an effort to act serious, the more they couldn't help but giggle. The technical crew did nothing as the actors gagged like schoolgirls for hours. Robert Wise eventually surrendered. Every aspect was transformed by him. He instructed the crew to shoot it in silhouette instead of using the elaborate lighting. Both the faces and the laughing may remain concealed in that manner. With the gazebo's windows in their sights, they set Plummer and Andrews up. A haze of mystery and softness descended over the scene. The disappearance of the raspberry noises was the most crucial aspect. Despite its disastrous beginnings, the sequence evolved into a cinematic classic. Nobody thought it came from anarchy. Naturally, the studio preferred that no one discover the truth. Fox 20th Century slammed the brakes on. It was expected that the raspberries, the mistakes, and the laughs would remain anonymous. The enchantment had to endure. The interview questions were predetermined. Conversations behind the scenes were off limits. Fans thought the scene had gone smoothly for a long time. Much later, when Andrews started recounting the tale on talk shows, the truth emerged. No easy feat as you're doing a passionate scene with someone and these vile raspberries are flying at you. Christopher Plummer, meantime, was fuming. He thought it was gooey and gave it the moniker Sound of Mucus because of his hatred of the film. He considered the entire affair to be beneath him. All it did was reinforce his pre-existing beliefs, the poor lighting, the continual delays. At that moment, he kept quiet. Never lost his composure. Deep down, though, he was enraged. It became a joke during the passionate scene. The fact that he had put on weight due to overeating and drinking while filming just made matters worse. He had turned Salzburg into his own emotional prison. Regardless, he turned up. When he spoke, he meant it. No matter how inebriated he was, which he confessed to being during some scenes, he maintained his persona the whole time. He remarked, "That was the hardest role I've ever played," after some time had passed. He had to act as though he cared, not because it was difficult or profound. Even though he was only acting, he contributed to the creation of something that would live on in people's memories. The scene at the music festival, when Captain Von Trapp sobs while singing Edelweiss, was another heartbreaking moment. Despite how it appears, Plummer was actually quite inebriated. In a DVD commentary in his memoir from 2008, he reiterated that he was quite intoxicated throughout filming. He referred to himself as a spoiled, conceited youth while he was inebriated. Still, it managed to become one of the film's most moving scenes. The earnestness was evident to the audience. They had no idea that Plummer was so weak that he could hardly stand. His stance on the picture remained unchanged throughout production. S&M, or the Sound of Mucus, was what he termed it. How sentimental it was, he despised. He made fun of it in interviews. Playing Captain Von Trapp was, in his words, like beating a dead horse. And cracked jokes about his attempts to provide a touch of humor to the sticky situation. He would roll his eyes whenever he heard the name of the movie for a long time. However, Plummer did concede, after many years, that the picture had ultimately enticed him. After some time had passed, he finally felt a peculiar sense of pride for having contributed to it. The topic of dubbing then arose. When Captain Von Trapp sings, it's usually not Plummer's voice, something that most fans don't know. He really did come and go. However, Disney's professional vocalist Bill Lee sang the longer notes. The choice irritated Plummer since, in his opinion, it detracted from his performance. But nobody in the crowd paid attention. People still mistake Lee for Plummer when they hear her sing Edelweiss because of how well she blended. The grown-ups weren't the only ones who endured hardship on site. Kim Carrath, who played Gretel, nearly drowned in the rowboat scene. She was 5 years old. Julie Andrews found out the infant couldn't swim only moments before filming began. What is their strategy? As soon as the boat capsized, Andrews was to swiftly seize her. Unfortunately, Andrews went down the wrong side as the boat capsized with more force than anticipated. Another actor dove in to rescue Kim after she fell under twice. She has a lifelong fear of swimming after vomiting up water after an accidental ingestion. Andrews wasn't even exempt. Filming that unforgettable opening scene where she spins around in the meadow was a living nightmare. A cameraman was attached to the side of a chopper as it soared just over her. The wind repeatedly pounded Andrews into the ground with each passing moment. Each time she was knocked down, she ate grass and dirt. This happened 6 or 7 times. In her head, she was already planning the next big song, but she kept attempting to sing and smile. It appeared magical, but it was actually quite aggressive. Even more insanity ensued due to hair disasters. Actor Daniel Trujillo, who played Rolf, bleached his hair so heavily that it never looked the same again. The harm was irreparable, and he was just 20 years old. His once thick mane gradually thinned out and never fully recovered. Years down the road, when he met fans, they'd still wonder why his hair was so dark. His blonde hairstyle, which was popular during the Nazi era, had a monetary price tag. A similar hair disaster befell Julie Andrews. On camera, the producers felt the shadows cast on her back were too dramatic. For the highlights, they dispatched her. Her hair turned a vibrant shade of orange when something went wrong. Fear spread over the group. In an effort to hide the tragedy, they reduced her hairstyle even further and colored it blonde. Subsequently, Andrews made light of the fact that being platinum blonde made her feel more Austrian. It was chaotic, though, when it happened. The whole public was in shock. Even the weather was unhelpful. The worst spring Salzburg had witnessed in half a century, according to Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich. It rained practically continuously. In order to create those upbeat scenes, the crew deployed enormous arc lights to simulate sunshine. Because of how severe it was, continuity issues began to arise as a result of children's development spurts. During the duration of filming, one actress had to wear false teeth since she lost all of her baby teeth. Himself, Hammond soared from 5 feet, 3 inches to over 6 feet. In order to keep up with his co-stars' towering statures, he had to perform several scenes barefoot. The warm musical that was meant to take place turned into a chilly, muddy marathon. It would appear that The Sound of Music is a classic that will warm your heart at first look. But hidden behind the picturesque landscapes and singing children is one of Hollywood's most deceitful tales. The film has taken a lot of heat from those who feel it reduces the Nazis to caricatures. It fails miserably in conveying the true dread of that moment. Cultural life was erasing Jewish people. Bruno Walter and Otto Klemperer, 2 renowned conductors, were forced to evacuate. It was illegal to play music composed by Jews. The Jüdische Kulturbund, a Nazi-created Jewish cultural association, attracted 180,000 members in its first 5 years of operation. But the movie stays away from all that. It romanticizes Austria without acknowledging the ongoing atrocities. Next, there's the thrilling mountain rescue sequence. The Von Trapp family makes it to Switzerland, their newfound freedom, after a perilous trek across the Alps. Anxiety-esferal, heroic, and unrealized. Actually, the family rode a train. They strolled serenely to the station, got on the train, and set out for Italy. They continued on to Switzerland, France, and finally London. There were no hidden routes or summit pursuits. The actual distance between Salzburg and the Swiss border is more than 200 miles. Furthermore, those mountain ranges from the film? The Eagle's Nest, Hitler's private getaway, was actually quite close by. Since Italy had invaded Dalmatia when George von Trapp was born there, the Von Trapps could legally travel with Italian passports. Accordingly, they were able to lawfully depart Austria. Filmmakers fabricated the film's version to make it seem more thrilling and dangerous than it actually is. Maria and Captain Von Trapp's love tale is similarly deceiving. The children were the real reason Maria wed him in real life. She herself stated it. He was likable, but not lovable, in my book. The sole reason she consented to marry him was in response to his request that she remain and raise their children. In reality, they tied the knot in 1927, not on the night of the Nazi invasion as depicted in the film. It was Maria, 22, and George, 47. 25 years separates them. They were married for pragmatic reasons, she said, but she eventually came to love him. The movie made it seem like a fairy tale, giving viewers a false impression of love and making it seem like their marriage was full of passion and romance. The narrative, even for children, was altered. Authentic Von Trapps had a brood of 10. Just 7 are shown in the film. Agatha Whitehead, George's first wife, had 7 children. Maria Francisca, Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, and Martina, Rupert, Agatha, and she. George had 3 more children, Rosa Mary, Eleanor, and Johannes, after his marriage to Maria. In addition to altering the ages, personalities, and names of the other children, the filmmakers also removed 3 actual children from the film. Agatha took on the persona of Liesel, an assured adolescent who engages in flirtatious behavior with a male. However, shy and solemn was the actual Agatha. The whole family burst out laughing the second they saw her on TV. There was purpose behind these alterations. The story was made cleaner, easier, and more marketable by doing these things. The truth was irrelevant to Hollywood. The characters weren't the only ones that were lied to. Edelweiss, one of the film's most moving tunes, deceived millions of people. It was thought to be an authentic folk tune from Austria. At a 1984 state dinner, even Ronald Reagan cited it. American composer Richard Rodgers and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein too wrote it in 1959 for the Broadway production in particular. Nothing more than a farewell to Austria was intended. Hammerstein composed it just before his cancer-related death. It goes to demonstrate how far Hollywood fiction can go when people start to think it's a true national anthem. Nobody could fool the local Austrians. The filmmakers were not allowed to collaborate with the Salzburg Marionette Theater. They were requested to supply the goat-herding scenario with puppets. However, in their own words, the theater declined. "We would prefer that they not appear in any cheesy Hollywood film." This extended beyond the realm of puppets. On the subject of pride, it was stated. Starting in 1913, the Marionette Theater ran its show. A unique method they had developed was eventually acknowledged by UNESCO. Hollywood, in their view, was watering down their art form. Ironically, they went on to produce their own puppet show based on the Sound of Music in order to capitalize on the influx of tourists brought about by the film. Also furious were a lot of Salzburgers. Politics, not the singing, is the reason. It wasn't as easy as the film made it seem. Austria wasn't the helpless victim of Nazi attack. Austria was ruled by a dictatorship prior to the Nazi takeover. It was under the control of an anti-Nazi dictatorship from 1934 until 1938. Although the government did imprison Austrian Nazis, it also stifled democratic expression. None of this was considered for the film. It simplified complicated political issues into a simple story of good versus evil. The natives were offended. The story of the trapped family singers, her 1949 memoir, served as the inspiration for the film, according to Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich in the film. However, though, in the 1950s, Maria mistakenly sold the rights to German companies, losing complete control over the process. Hollywood purchased the rights to the successful German films, but she was left out. Neither the American edition nor its producers sought her opinion, and she so lost money on both. Not at all. At the 1965 film premiere, she was not even invited. Her inquiry regarding attendance was met with the response that there were no available seats. Envision yourself cut off from your own narrative. A tale that changed the way people perceived your life and made hundreds of millions of dollars. Although Julie Andrews appeared carefree in her on-screen roles, she was anything but in reality. Her unanticipated reputation as a perfectionist sprang to prominence amid the melodies. As an actor, I want every line to be perfect, and that's not all. Julie was hell-bent on preventing the film from becoming a sanitized fairy tale. She was really concerned that the combination of 7 adorable children, charming music, and picturesque mountains could easily turn overly corny and artificial. How do we make this real? She repeatedly questioned Christopher Plummer, who was both her co-star and the film's director. Tell me how to slice the syrup. Julie didn't behave like a novice despite having recently returned from the popularity of Mary Poppins in 1964. She was very opinionated. She aimed for a more realistic, less naive portrayal of Maria and Captain Von Trapp's relationship. It was important to her that nobody in the crowd roll their eyes. Her meticulousness permeated every aspect of the production, from the script to the camera work to her line delivery. There was no ego involved. Mastery was at stake. And it turned out that her gut was correct. The studio was battling something far more terrifying: money, as Julie fought sweets. The original estimate was for $8.2 million. It was already rather high. However, it began to slide and eventually crash not long after. Why? The city of Salzburg. The studio was unaware of the city's perpetual rain, despite its stunning beauty. One of the wettest years ever recorded was 1964. The on-location shoot was supposed to take 6 weeks, according to director Robert Wise. Ultimately, it took 11. Everything from hotel rooms to food to pay increased as a result. 4 days, the crew of more than 250 workers did nothing but wait for the clouds to part. Things got expensive, individuals got cold, and camera gear got wet. Already, Fox was nearly bankrupt with the release of Cleopatra. Executives began to freak out because of this. The studio was filled with whispers. Could the company's fate be sealed by this upbeat family film? Not only that, but there was more intrigue taking place behind the scenes as well. William Wyler, the renowned director, was originally going to oversee the score before Robert Wise was appointed. Even more so, he resigned from his position on Fox's board in early 1963 in order to prevent any appearance of bias. It appeared that seriously. However, Wyler started off with reservations. The musical on stage was not to his liking. He was emotionally detached from the script. Even after boarding the plane to New York to watch the Broadway performance, he still felt bewildered. He felt uneasy listening to the music. He stated that they were inappropriate for the plot. Another stuff was there as well. The hearing of Wyler was deteriorating. Managing a musical became even more challenging. It was plainly visible to his wife. He simply wasn't interested. As a result, Wyler started stealthily seeking an exit. A clean break, one that wouldn't cause suspicion, was what he needed. Producers then presented him with The Collector. After reading the screenplay for the adaptation of the John Fowles novel, Wyler realized it was more his style. Sexy, perverse, and psychologically dark. He requested his freedom from his contract with Sound of Music from the Zanuck family, who were in charge of the studio. Whose word is it? Differences in availability. The press was informed of that. Fox reiterated that. When it came down to it, though, Wyler actually ran in the opposite direction. As a result, Robert Wise was able to step in and take over in late 1963.